Welcome to this training on the Eberspaecher Airtronic 3rd generation AX3 for North America. We'll cover heater sizes, small, medium, large, and extra large, including all diesel and gasoline versions. This training will highlight mostly what is different from Generation 2, but there will be information as well for those only used to Generation 1 and what changed since then. We won't get into much details on the changes from 1st to 2nd generation, since there is a specific recorded video on that topic. But if you have any question, don't hesitate to contact us. This is the agenda for this training. We'll start with nomenclature, followed by models available here in North America, what remains the same compared to the 2nd generation, what's new, a bit over mechanical and electrical compatibility, the installation kits available, and finalize with a summary comparing all 3 generations. The nomenclature format remains the same that you might be already familiar with from the Airtronic 2nd generation or Hydronic 3rd generation. We start with A for Airtronic, the next letters for the size or heating class, so S, M, L or XL, followed by 3 for 3rd generation. As a comment, we often refer to the Airtronic 3rd generation heaters as AX3, where the X can mean any of the sizes. Then we have the fuel type, D for diesel, B for gasoline, and B actually comes from benzene, the main component of gasoline. Then we have the heat output, and here for the Airtronic 3rd generation, depending on the size, from small to extra large, we have 2, 4, 6, and 8 kilowatts. Then the version, which the most common is L for long life, but also having available for certain models the recreational version, which is indicated for more complex and long ductworks. Next is voltage, either 12 or 24 volts. And finally, a marketing appendix that directly relates to the version, so commercial or recreational. Here we can see the different heater models available for North America as aftermarket part numbers. For OEM part numbers, please consult your sales representative. On the diesel versions, the first ones are the small 2 kW long life heaters in 12 and 24 volts. Then you have the medium 4 kW heaters in 12 and 24 volts, both in long life and recreational versions. Next are the large 6 kW long life heaters in 12 and 24 volts. And finally, the extra large 8 kW long life 24 volt heater. There is no 12 volt version available for this size, but the use of a 12 to 24 volt converter is possible by contacting our technical support team. On the gas versions, we have the new small 2 kW long life 12 volt heater. Then we have the medium 4 kW 12 volt heaters, both in long life and recreational versions. All these part numbers are available on our product catalog, alongside the installation kit part numbers that I will mention at the end of this training. Before we talk about what is really new on the 3rd generation Airtronic heaters, let's take a look on the improvements that were done on the 2nd generation compared to the first one, and that are being carried over now to the 3rd generation. If you already used the 2nd generation, most of this is probably familiar to you. First, we have the same heater connector and main harness used in the 2nd generation. As a reminder, in the 1st generation had a square 16-pin connector, and for 2nd and now 3rd generation is the same rounder 10-pin connector. There's a difference on the fuel metering pump and connector for the extra large size, but we'll talk about that later. Next, we kept the same electrical interface with CAN bus, lane bus for 12 volts and S+, also allowing for complex systems with more than one heater and more than one controller. As a recap, in the 1st generation we didn't have CAN bus communication and didn't allow complex systems. We carry over the improvements done on the fuel metering pump, which is much quieter compared to the 1st generation, due to internal changes on the pump and the electronic control of it. All 3 generations have the same mechanical connection and dimensions for small and medium heaters, which allow an easy upgrade from older to newer generation heaters. We'll talk more on the large and extra large heaters later on. In the 2nd generation, it was implemented a stageless heat output with tighter and better control of temperature, and this is being carried over to the 3rd generation. For comparison, in the 1st generation we only had 4 heat output levels. We continue with the brushless blower motor with direct connection to the ECU through 3 prongs, so no harness between them, compared to a brushed motor with harness in the 1st generation. The lifetime of 5,000 hours continues the same, compared to 3,000 hours in the 1st generation. The style of the combination sensor is the same as in the 2nd generation. It is assembled with an installation tool, which you can see in the image, on 2 posts on the heat exchanger. It doesn't come off as easily by mistake as it could happen in the 1st generation. We'll have a photo of the combination sensor in the next slides. We kept the acoustic improvements from second generation with electronic fuel metering pump, stageless heat output, improved blower wheel material and design, and motor control. Alright, now let's get to what we're really here for and talk about what is new on the third generation Airtronic heaters. Although the packaging dimensions remains the same between all three generations, we have a new external design, mostly on the top cover. This is the easiest and fastest way to differentiate the Airtronic third generation from the previous ones. You can always look at the nameplate sticker and you'll see the Airtronic AX3 in this example, also showing you it's a third generation. One of the main differences is the new combustion chamber, similar to what you might have seen on the HS3, the third generation hydronic heater. It is made of high quality laser welded sheet metal with base evaporator, or in other words, a burning matte technology. It has no more an atomizer screen or ventilation hole that requires maintenance like we had in the previous generations. It is lower weight and you can easily disassemble and assemble the glow plug with no need for special tools as we previously required, since the glow plug simply slides inside the chamber with no longer requiring to screw it in. The grommet and the glow plug can be accessed by simply removing the heater top cover. The position of the glow plug inside the chamber allows more mounting position, with now being able to tilt the heater to both sides compared to only one side previously. Depending on the heater size and fuel, the combustion chamber size and other parameters change, including the glow plug, so always refer to the spare parts manual for the correct part. The heat exchanger has been improved in terms of design for an optimized airflow and better control behavior of the heater. Of course, each heater size will have its own heat exchanger. We have a new ECU generation produced in-house, which has new internal connections that you should get familiar with. The blower motor direct connection through 3 prongs is in the same style as the second generation. We have combined the high current wires of main power and ground and glow plug wires in the same 4-pin connector. All other main harness control wires connect to the ECU on a separate connector. The combination sensor and the inlet temperature sensor go in a third connector, and you'll see in the next slide that they are actually a single part. As usual, the cable should be routed through the cable clips. Watch out when reassemble the ECU so it goes down straight into place by hand and not by using the 3 screws, otherwise you may risk breaking the 3 prongs on the blower motor assembly below. After snugging the ECU screws, always turn with your hand the blower wheel to make sure no cable is touching it. Also take care when closing the top cover so no wire is crushed. Now we have a new inlet temperature sensor that is separate from the ECU for an optimized position, allowing an improved control behavior of the heater, especially during low heat output levels. It sits in the blower motor assembly and can be easily removed and reinstalled as needed by 2 clipping tabs. As you can see on the picture on the right, this inlet temperature sensor comes together as a single part with the combination sensor and the connector to the ECU, so if required, must be replaced as a complete service part. We have sensor controlled starting sequences, so an improved behavior and reduced electric consumption on startup due to ambient sensor controlled starting sequences, where the ECU will perform a slightly different and more optimal starting routine based on the temperature values read by different sensors. For those who were not familiar with this type of combination sensor from the second generation, you can see it in the picture on the left, with it being assembled and locked into the heat exchanger on those 2 posts with a tool that is supplied with this spare part. The AX3 has automatic altitude adjustment for heights up to 4,000 meters, so 13,000 feet for the small size heaters, and for heights up to 5,500 meters, so 18,000 feet for the other sizes. Either way, any of those values are more than enough for almost all drivable locations in North America, and these height adjustments are done automatically without any need for user input. Let's take a look now on mechanical compatibility. We have the 4 sizes of AX3 heaters shown here in scale one compared to the other. One thing worth noting is that the outer shell size and part number of the large and extra large heaters are the same, with the main external difference between them being a shorter or longer heat exchanger. In terms of heater dimensions, for the small and medium-sized heaters, Their overall dimensions are exactly the same for all generations, first, second, and third. All heater dimensions shown here and in the next slide are in scale compared to the others. For the small size, the inlet duct diameter is 60 mm and the outlet hood diameter can be either 60 or 75. For the medium size, the inlet duct diameter is 75 and the outlet hood diameter can be either 75 or 90. When you look at the large and extra large heaters, they are smaller compared to their predecessors Airtronic 5 and the 8LC, which you can see the main dimensions for comparison in the dashed gray lines. For the large size, the inlet duct diameter is 90 mm and the outlet hood diameter is 90 as well. For the extra large size, the inlet duct diameter is also 90, but the outlet hood diameter is 100 mm. Here again we can see that height and width wise, the large and extra large are the same, use the same top and bottom shells, with one of the main difference being the length of the heat exchangers and outlet hoods. Regarding the flanges, the seal design has been improved for a higher protection on exhaust gas ingress and heating air loss. For the small and medium sizes, the dimensions of the flanges and bolt and stud measurements are identical between each other and also the same compared to previous generations. On the other hand, just like the heater dimensions, the large and extra large flanges are different from their predecessors. You can see that the bolt and stud measurements are the same between small, medium, and large sizes, but the flange area is much larger on a large size. The flange area is the same between large and extra large sizes, but extra large has different bolt and stud measurements. Knowing this might be useful if you're considering changing sizes of heaters in an already installed application. If we look at the combustion air and exhaust, there isn't generally any change in diameters and permitted minimum and maximum lengths compared to the previous small and medium-sized heaters, and these rules apply to all sizes of the third generation. The exception is an exhaust connection socket diameter of 30 mm in the extra large size compared to 24 mm in older versions. Another difference in the third generation is a fuel connector diameter of 5 mm for all sizes compared to 4 mm in previous generations of small and medium-sized heaters. This diameter requires an adapter that is included in the installation kits. Regarding fuel line diameters and length, it's the same as the second generation, with the exception of the new size gasoline small heater that must use a 4x1.25, so internal diameter of 1.5 mm, only in the pressure line, compared to a fuel line of 4x1, so internal diameter of 2, in all other sizes and fuel options. On the suction line, all AX3 heaters use the same 4x1 line. In terms of electrical compatibility, we use the same harness as the second generation Airtronic heater, which is quite different from the first generation. The exception is extra large size on the fuel metering pump connection, which we'll discuss shortly. We can point out here as important changes compared to the first generation: the separate fuel metering pump harness, the CAN connector with one of the CAN bus termination resistors on that cap, where we would connect the EasyStar Pro adapter harness, and the diagnostic connector for EasyScan with the second CAN bus termination resistor on that harness. We won't get into details here on those connections, as it's the same as the second generation, but if you require any support on any of them, we refer to the documentation available on our partner portal or contact our technical support team. The heater connector and pin assignments are the same as the second generation. It uses a 10-pin rounder connector, so different from the 16-pin square connector from the first generation. Exactly as we had in the second generation, if you're using an analog controller, you cannot have an external temperature sensor, since the pins 5 and 6 used for temperature set point are the same used in case of an external temperature sensor. You can only have an external temperature sensor by using a LIN-based or CAN-based digital controller. The change between the option of temperature set point that comes as default and the option of external temperature sensor can only be done using EasyScan. You can see here the great reminder to always check the harness resistance as part of a troubleshooting procedure or at the end of an installation. You must always have 60 ohms plus or minus 2 ohms between pins 1 and 3, which are the blue-red and blue-black wires. As for electrical compatibility with different controllers, it's the same as with the second generation, both for 12 and 24 volt heaters. With analog controllers, such as the microcontroller and the Digimax, we can't use the external temperature sensor, as I just mentioned, and no diagnostics is possible. On the 24 volt versions, lean is not available, so you can't use the Easy Start Select at all, and the Easy Start timer only works with S+ signal. The big advantage that started in the second generation and continues now is the use of CAN-based more advanced controllers, such as Easy Start Pro, that has several advantages and new features compared to their predecessors. For the extra large version, we have some differences relating to the fuel metering pump. First of all, the pump itself is different from the other sizes, which use the same style of fuel metering pumps as the second generation. The XL pump is the same style as the first generation Airtronic pumps, with a larger electrical connector on the outlet side of the pump. The pump is actually the same used in the Hydronic M2 heater. The connector style is the same as the first generation, so in order to connect the pump using the standard heater harness and fuel metering pump harness, what will be required to do is to cut the connector already installed in the fuel metering pump harness and replace it with the connector that is supplying the extra large installation kit. The other side of the fuel metering pump harness must be cut to length and the connector assembled as done previously in the second generation. The installation angle of the extra large fuel metering pump is also different from everything else. It must be installed in an angle between 45 degrees and 90 degrees, with the outlet always on the upper side. All other sizes use the same pump style as in the second generation, with a smaller electrical connector on the inlet side and the mounting angle as we've been used to, from 15 degrees to 35 degrees, with the outlet always on the upper side. Here's a quick glimpse on the different installation kits available for the AX3 and what is included in each. But always consult the latest version of the product catalog on our partner portal for a complete and updated list. We have different installation kits for all sizes, fuel types and versions, as well as the Eco and Cargo kits. To finalize the training, let's do a recap on several topics and how they have changed from first to second to third generation of Airtronic heaters. By generation 1 and 2, I'm referring to the small and medium-sized heaters that we had available previously. I'm not referring to the older, larger Airtronic 5 and the 8LC heater. Now with the third generation, we have heat capacity of 2, 4, 6 and 8 kilowatts, compared to only 2 and 4 previously. Starting with the second generation, we moved from a 4 stages heat output to a stageless heat output and better temperature control. While in the first generation we had a brushed motor with harness to the ECU, later generations moved to a brushless motor connecting to the ECU directly to 3 prongs. The blower wheel itself had improvements from first to second generation, using currently multi-component material and having improved design for better acoustics, performance and energy consumption. The lifetime of the heater increased from 3000 hours to 5000 hours with the use of the brushless motor that I just mentioned. The high altitude capacity changed from a manual 1500 meters adjustment in the first generation to an automatic 3000 meters adjustment in the second generation, and now up to 4000 or 5500 meters in the third generation. The inlet temperature sensor has now on the third generation an improved position, separate from the ECU, to enhance the heater performance. The fuel metering pump had significant improvements and changes from the first to the second generation that were carried over to the third generation. The big difference is in the extra large size pump, as I mentioned before. One of the big differences in third generation is the combustion chamber, with no more atomizer screen and ventilation hole, since it uses a burning mat technology, reducing the amount of maintenance required. A few more. The heat exchanger has been improved in the third generation for an increased performance. The glow plug was previously threaded, and now it simply slides into place, having also an improved lifetime. The combination sensor style changed on the second generation, requiring a tool to install it, and not being easily removed by mistake. The acoustics have largely improved starting on the second generation, with electronic fuel metering pump, stepless heat output, better blower motor control, build material and design. The packaging and overall mechanical interface remains the same throughout all 3 generations. The seal design of the bottom flange has been improved in the third generation for higher protection on exhaust gas ingress and heating air loss. The fuel connector diameter is now 5 mm in the third generation, compared to 4 mm in the previous generations. The exhaust diameter of 24 mm remains the same in all generations, with the exception of being 30 mm in the new extra large size. Because of the position of the glow plug inside the combustion chamber, we now allow more mounting positions, being able to tilt the heater to either side. In the first generation, we had a square 16-pin connector with generation 1 harness. And now from the second generation onward, we have changed to an enhanced rounder 10-pin connector with the new harness. One of the big news on the second generation and carryover to now is the CAN bus electrical interface. The ECU have changed throughout the generations, including the different connections to it. With the introduction of the CAN bus, it's possible from second generation onward the use of more complex systems with more than one heater and more than one controller. The different controller options evolved from being only S Plus and Lean bus based to also allowing CAN bus based controllers, such as EasyStart Pro. Some considerations must be made when using analog controllers on newer generations, as I mentioned previously, and Lean bus only being available for 12-volt heaters. The EasyScan diagnostic tool is backward compatible with the first generation, but it doesn't work on the newer generations which use CAN bus. The EasyScan is here for the long run, for current and future heaters, so it's the main tool we advise to use. Lastly, with the change on the combustion chamber, we eliminate two key maintenance items, the atomizer screen and the ventilation hole, leaving basically only the fuel filter on the third generation. That's the end of the training. Hope what you learned today will help you work with the third generation of Airtronic heaters. If you have any question, don't hesitate to contact our technical support team.